them to me. So all the people broke off the golden earrings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand, and he fashioned it with an engraving tool and made a molded calf. Then they said, "This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt." So when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord." Then they rose early on the next day, offered burnt offerings, and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play.
Rose up to play. I like that. Mine says revel. I like that. Thank you, Chris. Perfect. All right, so that's the entire story. Great. Thank you, Mark, for doing that. So that's the entire story. First off, again, we talked about the setting and the stage and what triggered the Israelites to become impatient. So as I'm kind of laying out a path, here we have first the danger of impatience, which is what we just covered. And now we're transitioning to impatience leading to imprudence. To kind of have, a little lawyer speak there. Impatience leads to imprudence. Why did the fact that Moses was gone so long not only trigger impatience in the Israelites, and I think we've maybe touched on that sufficiently, but trigger this decision of plan B? Why would that inspire them to come to Aaron and say, "Make us something"? This is kind of an open mic. I don't have a particular answer, so just kind of your thoughts on why that would flow from the impatience of the Israelites in that moment. Any thoughts, Chris?
I don't know where I'm getting this from, but we can presume, it's just a spitball, that the Egyptians, when they worshipped their deity, they created an image of what they thought that deity, multiple deities were. And so the kind of thought is that Egypt and its processes had not been purged from the Israelite way of life.
That's a great insight. They'd certainly observed a people that were not monotheistic, meaning one God like the Israelites were. They were polytheistic, the Egyptians. They had all manner of gods, and surely many of them with physical depictions, be they paintings or idols or statues or whatnot. So the fact that maybe they reverted back to what they recalled, with some level of familiarity, not all that long before. That's a good answer, Chris. Again, I don't have a particular answer in mind. That's a great one. Any other thoughts? Rhonda?
I have one. This is kind of silly, but, first of all, boys wore earrings back then.
Apparently. Apparently. Not just Egyptian boys, but the Israelite boys did.
I thought it was kind of strange that it was probably a lot of that was things that had been given to them by the Egyptians when they plundered when they left.
Yes, indeed.
And so now they've put it into a communal fire to burn something. I mean, it kind of purged or gave them something that maybe they, like you said, the familiarity or all, but I would think it was gold from the Egyptians. So what significance was that?
No, I don't either. That's not silly. That's a good comment. Other thoughts? Lee?
There were, correct me if I'm wrong, there were some Egyptian slaves that were part of the group that left.
I don't know that I can correct that. I don't know. I'll defer to you on that one. I don't recall one way or the other on that. So you're thinking there might have been some Egyptians in the camp that might have said, maybe whisper in the ears of some people, hey.
It's part of the overall influence that you're talking about. And the calves were a god. It was seen as a fertility god or something. It's very important to the Egyptians. So that whole mindset just traveled with them. I don't see that they could have gotten away from it.
Excellent point. Excellent point. They wanted something tangible, something visible. Again, I'm presuming right in their midst is quite visible presence of God. Right. Yet they wanted something like that they could hold on to and bow down and worship. We would call that an idol, clearly. And in quite the literal sense, that is, an idol. And it's I think, quite ironic that Moses is up top of the mountain, and one of the directives God is giving is don't make idols. And while he's telling Moses this, down there on day 36, they're doing exactly that. Perhaps because God knew that the Egyptian influence and whatever else, they were going to be bent in that direction if given the opportunity, and maybe God delayed long enough to give them that opportunity so they could actually bend in that direction and encounter the wrath of being idolatrous, which is definitely what follows. What does idolatry look like in our context? I want to kind of now have a little more of a circumspect pause for a moment. We're not apt to take off our earrings and chisel them into some, animal form, but I dare say our society is quite idolatrous. What does that look like? What are the idols today? Comfort.
People.
Good. Comfort, money, people, prestige.
Power.
Yeah, power.
I think about the cross that you see when you go to other countries. I don't know which country it is, but it's way up high. And when you go into that country,
Yeah, it's Brazil, I think.
you see the cross
Mm-hmm.
and on our hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes you think of God, that might be a godly place, a godly country.
Right.
A safe place. And also your television.
Television. Interesting, yeah. Entertainment.
Watch television a lot. Because all
Indeed.
everywhere.
Indeed.
I don't look at that as being a God.
Well, and that's why I'm asking the question, Peggy, because I think we can embrace things that we wouldn't label idols and we wouldn't think are offensive to God, and perhaps they are. We're not fashioning golden calves that are, maybe an obvious idol, but are we doing things like we've discussed, among the folks who've responded? I'm not going to get into your television usage. We all have our own issues, but the point is, idolatry is not something found in Exodus 32 and not present today. It's present quite prevalently, I'd say, today, and looks different. It's just packaged differently. In 21st century United States of America, idolatry looks like this. In BC, whatever, idolatry was a golden calf that came from earrings that people were wearing. Idolatry is ever present. The first, the second commandment to everyone was that says, don't make idols. We're not inclined to do that, and so we would be like the people that came to Jesus and said, I haven't broken a single commandment, when really we're probably a lot more idolatrous than we want to give ourselves credit for being, because we pursue prestige and power and comfort and entertainment, things that to me, what distinguishes those things as they are to becoming idolatrous is that they are now consuming our time. They're now consuming our attention. We are elevating them to a status to which they don't belong. And they're approaching, if not usurping, the status of God, as we're all about this, that, and the other. That's when things become idol, and I think we hopefully can see that that's happening in our midst, maybe even in our own household. Gary.
Well, you've got the actors that have started their own religion, right, in California?
Oh boy, yeah. False religion is definitely, can be an idol, and that's one example. Quick question. So this is a more rhetorical question, but in light of that, do we, and again, I'm not looking for an answer unless you feel so bold, do we, as current folk, find ourselves turning to idols when it seems God has been so long in coming, or delayed in coming, or we don't know what's become of this Jesus? I think we do. I think we need to own that. I think we need to recognize, again, that it doesn't look perhaps like it's portrayed in Exodus chapter 32, but that our inclination is to be impatient with God, and when he's slow in coming, then, to find some other things that can take his place. Probably subconsciously, we're probably not deliberately saying, I want to find something to take God's place, but we're allowing our sin nature to kind of drive us in that direction, and we're oblivious to the fact that we're doing that, and GPS is telling us to recalculate, and we're not, and there we are. Suddenly we find ourselves in an idolatrous moment, much like these people. Let's look at Aaron. So one of the questions over here was, why was Aaron spared? Rena asked that question. I don't know about the why was Aaron spared so much, but I did want to ask, let's look at Aaron's behavior. So they come to Aaron. He's like the next in charge. Moses is gone. Aaron's been his sidekick the whole time. We see that Joshua obviously isn't playing an important role in Moses' life, as more Moses' helper. Aaron has been Moses' mouthpiece, at least for some of it. So they come to Aaron and say, hey, Aaron, we don't know what's coming to that guy. If you don't know the guy, he's the guy that led us out of Egypt. They make that point, but we don't know where he is, so do this for us. Put yourself in Aaron's situation. He is being approached by, how many people actually came and spoke this thing? We don't really know. It's identified as the people, so I don't think there's a million people that are sitting there talking to Aaron, but I think whoever shows up in Aaron's presence is a delegation essentially representing a million some odd people. So I think that the passage indicates to me that what they speak, they're speaking as one mind with the people. And so Aaron is here, and these folks are saying, we don't know what's coming to him, make us a god. And I heard a couple of different, Diana's and Chris's. Yours said gods, plural. Mine has gods, singular. I think all of ours have God with a lowercase g. I'm guessing yours is a lowercase g, Diana. Mine definitely is. Okay. So they are not saying, make us an image of Yahweh. Technically, at least the Hebrew word that's used. In fact, the Hebrew word that's used here is Elohim, which is a word that means God in a general sense, as opposed to Yahweh, which is the actual Hebrew God. So they're asking quite literally, make us an Elohim, because we don't know what came of this Moses, and we want someone to worship, something to worship. All right, so you're Aaron, and they come and they ask you this request. We see that Aaron basically obliges, but let's kind of think through, why would Aaron have obliged? Why would he have done such a thing?
Fear of the people.
All right, so maybe a little self-preservation. If I say no, what are the people going to do with me? They seem pretty impatient.
He too may have been wondering, where's Moses?
Yeah, he might have had the same curiosity, and I can't go find out. Even though I'm the next in charge, I'd die if I touch that upward slope that begins the mountain. I thought through some of those things. I thought to keep peace, that there's this delegation, if they do represent a million some odd people and they're wanting me to do something, if I say no, then maybe my life is in danger. At the very least, there might be some kind of an uprising of some sort. Maybe I'm not killed, but things get pandemonious, and I don't know that I want to do that. He was put in a difficult spot. I don't know, and I don't think the passage gives us great clarity as to his internal thoughts at this moment. Y'all are crazy. I would never do such a thing. But gosh, there's rebellion coming, and maybe I need to relent just so that the thing doesn't go off the rails. I'd like to think he had those thoughts, but the passage doesn't really say that. We would be reading into it if it does. So maybe he, as Chris said, maybe he's waffling a bit and his faith is weak. Maybe he is trying to, keep peace. I think, and where we're going to go is what he ends up doing. He ends up saying yes, essentially, and he literally is the one that crafts this thing, despite the fact that later on he makes it sound like it just happened, spontaneously. But let's look here. I'll just take a few moments to look at what I think is his valiant but ill-advised attempt to find a middle ground. So they ask him again in verse 1, make us a god, lowercase g, Elohim, or Elohim, whatever that plural of that is that Chris and Diana's readings were. Aaron says, give me all your earrings, even you fellows with the earrings in your head. Give them to me. He does. Once he's made it, jump down to verse 4. The people, they then said, so this is again the people, and my translation says, Israel this is. So it suggests that the delegation now basically turns to the masses and says, hey y'all, this is your God. And then Aaron comes and talks about, in verse 5, there will be a festival to the Lord tomorrow. That is Yahweh. So Aaron is identifying this calf as the Lord Yahweh, the people that are making the request, and the people that now proclaim to the masses, this calf is an Elohim. So it seems by this effort, and they're making burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, which the Lord did in fact require of them, and we're going to learn more about that in Leviticus, what those specific things are. So it seems to me that Aaron is relenting, that he's attempting to appease the people. I'm going to give you this golden thing that you're asking for, but I'm going to view it as a representation of Yahweh God, and I'm going to try to communicate to all of you that this is a representation of Yahweh God and not an Elohim, not an equivalent of an Egyptian God. So he, it seems, as the leader in this moment, is trying to sort of put his feet in both boats, not realizing the boats are drifting farther apart, and he's about to become very uncomfortable. which made me wonder, what middle grounds do we encounter? And some of the answers that you previously raised are kind of middle grounds. The middle ground for Aaron was, I'll make this idol, but I'm going to say that he's a representation of Yahweh God. And maybe we're fine with that. Maybe that's not so offensive. Chris.
The note that I've got for verse 5.
Please, go ahead.
Reads, syncretism, I guess that's the word, brought about the ludicrous combination of an idol, an altar, and a feast celebration held in a bizarre attempt to honor the true God.
Ludicrous and bizarre. Yeah, pretty strong words in that note.
The ludicrous combination that we have is the question. How many churches will teach, or people will teach that, well, this is Jesus' a way to God. Or this is the way we worship, but the way you worship is fine too. We worship God, but whatever you do or whatever you choose to do is good. No, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father except through him.
Amen.
And there's no wiggle room to that.
Great answer.
How many religions around the world will water that down? Or religions in places here in Jacksonville will water that down.
Yeah.
And say that other ways are okay too.
Excellent. I agree entirely with what Chris just said there. So yeah, as I thought of that question, the challenge that it posed to me, the middle grounds can be churches that have a decent biblical foundation but are a little soft on theology and allow just a little bit of discrepancy to creep in, and suddenly after a little while that discrepancy makes the boats drift farther apart from true north, and now you're off course and you don't realize it. Or Chris mentioned the idea, I'm going to rephrase it a bit, the notion that people who genuinely have a Christian faith are fine. People who genuinely have a Muslim faith are also fine. And, it's like the sincerity of your belief is what matters and not the accuracy of your belief or the validity of your belief. There's a lot of that floating around. A lot of people will say, exactly what Chris said. I believe in my path genuinely, but I'm not going to say yours is wrong. If you have a genuine, sincere belief in your path, who am I to judge? That kind of mindset. That's clear middle ground places. Not so different from the ludicrous demonstration and a bizarre effort to marry an idolatry to Yahweh God. So I bring that up again to see that impatience is not unique to the ancient times, that idolatry is not unique to the ancient times, that middle ground positions are not unique to the ancient times, and that we need to be mindful of that. Stuff that's flavored biblical but has something that just tastes a little quite off. Don't swallow that and think it's fine and dandy, no harm and no foul. That's the beginnings of middle ground that can become really treacherous. Hang on a second, Gary. I think you had a comment.
Talk about
Patrick.
how detailed he is.
Yes.
Specifically made that commandment. Make no graven images.
Yes.
Because he can't be identified in an image or anything like that. So
Right.
He knew he had to put that one in there too.
With clarity.
No graven
Yeah.
images.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. And yet, they hadn't heard that. Moses heard that, but because he knew mankind is inclined to do that. So I better lay this down as one of the 10 and make it real clear. Great. Gary.
Another way to say what you're saying. Even if we do not make idols, we are often guilty of trying to make God in our image, molding him to fit our expectations, desires, and circumstances. When we do this, we end up worshiping ourselves rather than the God.
Man's made to worship something. Often it's ourselves if we apply that wrong. Great point. Great point. So I'm running out of time. I do want to get to the ludicrous response that Aaron gives to the challenge when Moses comes down, is furious, and we're not going to have time to get into the Moses and God dialogue. God seems to soften after Moses says, don't wipe out your people. But he comes down from the mountain, and he sees, he finally sees what God says is going on. And in his anger, he takes the 2 tablets and spikes them on the ground, and they become 50, chunks of tablets. And then he goes to Aaron and says the following. I will read just for the sake of time. Chapter 32, so you're there, verse 19. As he approached the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, Moses became enraged and threw the tablets out of his hand, smashing them at the base of the mountain. Then he took the calf that they had made, burned it up, I love this, ground it into powder. He scattered the powder over the surface of the water and forced the Israelites to drink the water. I love that. You want an idol? Here you go, inside of you. Swallow this gold bits and see what kind of wreckage it does to your digestive system. Verse 21, then Moses asked Aaron, what did this people do to you that you have led them into such a grave sin? So Moses makes no bones about what this, how offensive this was. And it seems like he's giving Aaron a way out. What did the people do to you? It's like you couldn't possibly have relented to this. They must have tied you up and, was pulling your fingernails out one by one, and so you said, I'll do it. Some kind of a torture thing. And here's Aaron's comical response. Don't be enraged, my lord, little L. Aaron replied, you yourself know that this people are intent on evil. So he is kind of embracing the idea of blaming the people. They said to me, make us a god, lowercase g, who will go out before us, because this Moses, the man who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him. So that's an accurate recitation of what they said. So I said to them, this is where it gets funny, whoever has gold, take it off. And they gave it to me. I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. I can't help but laugh reading that. I threw it in the fire, and bang, just that heat, and all of a sudden, gold earrings become a calf. Not that he chiseled it with a tool like we read about, that Chris read earlier. So he gives this cockamamie answer, and obviously Aaron, Moses didn't buy it, and God clearly didn't buy it. So kind of humorous, but at the same time, a pretty sad tale. This is a leader, a spiritual leader, and when he's challenged, why weren't you true to what you know? He blames the people, and he comes up with this crazy story, a lie. So we've got the dangers from impatience, and impatience leading to imprudence, with the people wanting this idol and him agreeing to it. Imprudence then often inspiring dishonesty, which is where we are right now, because now he's caught and he's been called out, so to speak, and he doesn't want to embrace accountability, so he comes up with this crazy story. And we don't have the time to hit the last part, which was a failure of spiritual leadership, which is demonstrated by Aaron, and I'm going to just kind of have to leave that out there for you to contemplate. The last of the 4 points I wanted to make out of chapter 32. Just a lot in here, again, at times humorous in its absurdity and ludicrousness, to use what Chris read from, but ultimately a very sad tale of how humanity can make such a radical left turn away from God, seemingly for no good reason, and want to camp out there. Let's be sure that we're not steering our cars, the radical left turn of life like these guys were. Let me close this in prayer. God, we are challenged by this passage, challenged by the behaviors of these folks, and if we're candid, challenged by the fact that we exhibit some of these same behaviors. Please ground us in you, ground us in a solid faith, an unwavering faith. Give us patience so that we don't start down this path of patience to imprudence, to dishonesty, to failed leadership. Help us remain true to you even when you don't give us the details. You have shown yourself worthy. You have proven to us individually that you are sovereign and that you can be trusted. Help us to do that better. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.